there was a connection. Now, this was a political organization, but it did promote the church in the West, and the church made communication with this organization with a promise to establish the Ethiopian Orthodox Father Church here in the U.S. This organization was established in Harlem. And in 1952, His Grace Abuna Theophilus, who was an archbishop of a province called Harar, who also would be the second patriarch of Ethiopia later, he visited the U.S. and he reassured members of this organization that the church would be established soon. And he returned some years later in 1959 to officially establish the church in the U.S. on October 25 of the same year. An interesting thing that happened on this day is that 252 new converts were baptized on the very same day. An acknowledgement that I forgot to give here when I mentioned Abuna Isaac is that most of the story that I give here is from the book that His Grace Abuna Isaac authored, which is titled The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, an Integrally African Church. His contribution was really extraordinary for the mission in these places, and including South Africa. And so, as I mentioned, we see the missionary nature of the church early. The unfortunate circumstance that I had described in the destruction of the hierarchy and in the conflicts in many different parishes, is that there has been no focus, no concerted focus early enough on the children that were born here, and also on reaching out non-Ethiopians. And this has gone on for a very long time. Thank goodness that has changed, but not nearly enough. As I mentioned, a fourth of what we're... That's a very low estimate.
Wow, that is insane to think. How did that spread?
So, while the spread, the growth of the church is very good, for the most part, from what I have seen, the manner in which it was spread was actually not pleasant. And that's why I believe that, the expansion has not always been smooth. And that is because of, I mentioned the hierarchical dysfunction.
Yes. Wow. That seems like forever ago, but it also was just yesterday. So to think that the hundreds of people that were baptized, and so many people that were baptized at such a young age of the church, dare I say day one of the church here in the US, I guess, what does that have to say about the churches that we have now in the United States? I mean, like you said, we have over hundreds of EOTC churches across the nation, including Canada. And to think that on day one, we were able to baptize hundreds of people, to now where we can honestly baptize a fourth of what were originally baptized in 1 year. What are some things that you think the EOTC faith maybe or not the EOTC faith, but the EOTC church maybe has, I guess, lost its eyes upon as the time goes on? Hello and welcome to another episode of our podcast here on Beta Tekle. My name is Tesfaye and I have been your host. With me, I have a guest who is new to our show so far, Kesis Alemayehu from Dallas, Texas, who serves at Kesis Alemayehu, my home church, and is the author of two books titled The Introduction to the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Faith and the other one titled As I Have Loved You. Kesis, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. For today's specific episode, we talked about it in our episode before, a couple episodes back. If you'd like to, if our viewers would like to go back and check it out, we did an interview with Tesfaye Selassie. And during that interview, we talked about the origins of the church in the American diaspora. We touched up upon it, but I know that I myself, and as well as the viewers that have been watching, had a lot of different questions about how did the EOTC church really get founded within America or within the outside diaspora. And so I have Kesis Alemayehu with me today to actually talk about that. How did the EOTC faith branch out into other places outside of Ethiopia, specifically in America, as that is our focus for today. So, Kesis, again, thank you so much for joining me. For those who may not know, what is the EOTC faith and what makes it unique from other churches around the world?
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. Thank you again for having me on. This is my first time as a guest, but I have been watching the last few episodes that you have been conducting, and wonderfully.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church is unique in many aspects. One that I probably I would like to mention is the continuity of the history of faith in Ethiopia, starting from before the books of the law, the books of Moses were written. And so that the history of faith in Ethiopia before that period is called a history according to the law of the heart. There was no written ordinance about the faith, but there is a testament in the scripture itself that faith, Judaic faith, was practiced in Ethiopia. And then there is a second era after the arrival of the Ark of the Covenant and several priests and books of the Old Testament, with the coming of Menelik I, who is the son of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. So how that happened, I'm sure most of the viewers know about that. I won't go into the story. And so after that was after many priests and the Ark of the Covenant and the different books came to Ethiopia, we started practicing Judaic worship, and that era is called faith according to the law. And after that, of course, Christianity was introduced in the first year after the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. This is something that is also written about in the book of Acts on chapter 8. Where we have a story of the Ethiopian finance minister of the Queen, who was baptized by Philip when he was on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. But even before that, on the day of Pentecost, it is said that there were many Ethiopians who heard the preaching of Saint Peter and the apostles on the descent of the Holy Spirit, on the day that the Holy Spirit descended on the disciples, and that they came and spread Christianity in Ethiopia. And also the Ethiopian finance minister, who is usually known as the Ethiopian eunuch now. But the sacramental practice did not start until the 4th century because there was no bishop or priest to conduct or to administer the sacraments. but there is a small transition into Christianity from practice of Judaic worship into practice of Christian worship, or we can specifically say Orthodox worship. So this continuity is very unique to the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, and as our sister church, the Oriental Orthodox Church, we believe that the teaching and the doctrines that we have today is the teaching that we have received from the apostles, and we don't have anything that we add as a new doctrine. Everything that we have, everything that the church teaches in the Oriental Orthodox Church is what was received from the apostles and what was revealed to the apostles. And so our faith is a revealed faith. So in short, we can't say many, but these are some of the unique aspects of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church.
Absolutely, well said. So after the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church was established in Ethiopia, how did that begin to move into the United States, and when did that happen?
So to go back and look at the administrative structure of the church at first, after the arrival of Abuna Salama, or who was named Frumentius before it was ordained as the bishop by St. Athanasius. After his arrival, for the next 1600 years, the Ethiopian church was basically archdiocese of the Coptic Orthodox Church. It gained autocephaly, meaning independence. It became a patriarchate. It had its own patriarchate, and it was elevated to be an autocephalous church in 1959. And His Holiness Abuna Basileus was the first patriarch of Ethiopia. And so this is 1600 years. It's a very long time after the sacraments, or after the first bishop came to Ethiopia. So this is a very important moment in the history of the church, but one that we need to be mindful of when we speak about when and how the church spread to the rest of the world. For the most part, we are going to talk about North America here. The establishment of the church in the US was a result of what is known as the Ethiopian World Federation, which was established by a person named Dr. Malaku Bayena during the Italian occupation of Ethiopia. Dr. Malaku Bayena is the first Ethiopian to graduate as a medical doctor here in the United States, but he also served as a diplomat for Ethiopia and the United States. And he was a Pan-African advocate. Pan-Africanism, for those who might not know, in general, is a global movement and ideology that seeks to unify and uplift people of African descent. And so he was a known advocate for that movement. And as a diplomat in the United States during the Italian occupation of Ethiopia, he founded this Ethiopian World Federation in 1937 under the directive of Janhoy, His Eminence Emperor Haile Selassie. This was established basically to promote dialogue and more communication between Ethiopians and the African American community here in the US. And the organization helped promote the church in the West. And once this connection was, once this federation was established, there was a connection. Now, this was a political organization, but it did promote the church in the West, and the church made communication with this organization with a promise to establish the Ethiopian Orthodox Father Church here in the U.S. This organization was established in Harlem. And in 1952, His Grace Abuna Theophilus, who was an archbishop of a province called Harar, who also would be the second patriarch of Ethiopia later, he visited the U.S. and he reassured members of this organization that the church would be established soon. And he returned some years later in 1959 to officially establish the church in the U.S. on October 25 of the same year. An interesting thing that happened on this day is that 252 new converts were baptized on the very same day. By comparison, today, we don't baptize even, a quarter of that many a year. But this is something that is notable. So the church, so this is basically in Harlem. Later, the church would expand to Canada also, and the first church in Canada was established in 1972. Now, going even before this, though, there is actually a history a history of the church that we find elsewhere in the Western Hemisphere. The first church in the Western Hemisphere was actually not the one in Harlem, but the one that was established in 1952 in Trinidad and Tobago. And it was established by a monk named Abba Jesus Meshesha and Ato Abraham Jemberry. There was a movement for a decade before this establishment to make this happen, specifically by two natives in Trinidad and Tobago, who later would be ordained as deacons. And the church would later expand to Guyana, Jamaica, and the U.S., especially after the arrival of Abba Mandefro, a young and vibrant monk who would later be ordained as an archbishop of the Western Hemisphere and would be named Abuna Yisak. An acknowledgement that I forgot to give here when I mentioned Abuna Yisak is that most of the story that I give here is from the book that His Grace Abuna Yisak authored, which is titled The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, an Integrally African Church. His contribution was really extraordinary for the mission in these places, and including South Africa, and oftentimes under difficult circumstances. For more than 30 years as an archbishop, he has been leading the mission in these areas and also established many churches in the U.S. So coming back to the U.S., a church in the name of St. Hamanut was established in Los Angeles in 1973. And this happened through the invitation of interested groups, not Ethiopians, but interested groups, which was led by a person named Anthony Hamilton, who also would be ordained as a priest and a deacon later by His Grace Abuna Yisak. Another parish, St. Mary of Zion, was established in Los Angeles in 1983 to serve the growing number of Ethiopian nationals. So what we have seen so far, besides the establishment of the church in Canada in 1972, for the most part, the establishment of the church was missionary focused. It was not for Ethiopians, but it was in 1972 in Canada and later in 1983 in Los Angeles that we see the church was established to serve the growing number of Ethiopian nationals, and more churches would be established later in Washington, D.C., Chicago, New York also, and Dallas, and many other places. And today, it's a rough estimate that there are more than 250 churches in the U.S. in several states. But the growth and the expansion of the church in general after this time has not always been smooth. So that's what I have really on the introduction on the history.
No, it was amazing. And I'm glad that you mentioned that when the EOTC church was first brought into America and how many people that they converted and then baptized. I'm glad you mentioned that because we will absolutely get to that question or get to that aspect of this conversation later in this video. So just to keep people or to have that on the back of people's minds. So then I guess my question would have to pivot to I know you mentioned that most or the very first churches that came to the US of the EOTC faith weren't necessarily for Ethiopian immigrants. They were for people that were longing for the EOTC faith. So I guess my question would be what motivated Ethiopian immigrants to start founding churches in America rather than just simply joining other Christian congregation? Because by the time the EOTC faith arrived in North America, there were hundreds of Christian denominations. What necessarily drove them to build the EOTC faith itself rather than just assimilating into American culture?
In general, it's yeah. One reason is it's a matter of identity. Anyone who goes to another place, they would like to maintain their identity. And when it comes to Ethiopians and the faithful in the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, it's not easy to find a church that is similar in terms of the richness of its worship practices. And so it is a known fact that faith in Ethiopia in general is very much interrelated. And when I say faith, it's not just an active faith, but a dynamic faith. People are involved, highly involved in worship practices, and because these worship practices are integral component of the life of many Ethiopians, it was not easy to assimilate into any other church. And for the most part, most churches here in the US are Protestant churches, and the few that Orthodox church that we have, for the most part, do not really have a similar way or mode of worship as we have. And the language itself is, of course, a limiting factor. And so naturally, being very much worship and faith being very much a part of the identity of Ethiopians, it was something that brought many, especially as the number grows in a certain place. There was naturally a tendency to establish a church. And that is really how it started. In fact, when what we saw earlier in the establishment was basically the church being more proactive in establishing church for non-Ethiopians in the West. When it comes to serving to the Ethiopian community, it was the driving force was not the missionary activity of the church, but the need and the interest of immigrants into the US who basically pushed for an establishment of the church so that they can practice and worship in the tradition and in the manner that they are used and accustomed to.
That's really interesting. So, how did early members organize services before there were maybe official buildings or clergy here?
For the most part, it would be in rented properties. That's how it was. Even when the first church was established in New York, initially it was established and service started in a rental building. But shortly after that, officially the government of Ethiopia itself purchased a building, and I believe that building is still owned by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And if I'm not mistaken, it is in fact the Archdiocese of the New York, the Archdiocese of the seat of the Archdiocese in New York. In most other places, again, it was basically renting church buildings, and at times, in some places, Ethiopians used to go to Russian Orthodox Church, so Greek Orthodox Church, and when they used to just gather for Bible study in these churches. The Greek and Orthodox churches in many places were very much welcoming. And as the number of the congregants grew, they would invite priests or a bishop once or twice a year, so that they would have divine liturgy, so that they would baptize children that are born here, and that's how basically it was conducted. It was not. It was not. It was a hard choice, but it was a choice that had to be made. So as you know, we don't divine liturgy is not conducted without an altar and without a tabernacle. And so if it's a rental place, and especially if it's a rental place that is shared, that was the case. Some places, for example, some churches would have to rent a space in a Baptist church, which means that they would have to go in, set up the altar, carry the tablet around, and conduct the divine liturgy quick, and then leave the room or the premise in time for the owners to come in and do their own worship. So this was the way it was done. And in Dallas also, I remember when I first came to Dallas, we did not actually have our own church. There was no regular service when I came. There were, in fact, very few churches in the United States, probably 5 or 6 in New York, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and Chicago. And when I came to Dallas, twice a year, I believe twice a year, the congregants here, they used to invite a bishop for divine liturgy. And that divine liturgy was conducted in an American Orthodox church that is known as Saint Seraphim Orthodox Church. And so their service generally starts around 8:30 a.m. or 9. And so we would have to go in very early in the morning, or the service would have to be on a Saturday, and get out of there very quick. And so for the most part, it was in this manner. Later, as the church expanded and grew, many congregations started buying their own properties, but there were still many that were renting places. And what became sort of common later on is instead of renting a church building, there was a practice of just renting any space, any place. It could be in a shopping strip. So we had churches established or started in this manner also. And there may be other different ways that are known to me. But this is how really the church came to grow and to expand.
Interesting. It's so, I guess, jarring seeing the difference between the original churches that first were in America and now. So you mentioned that the very first church was, yes, like it was rented for a while, and then you said it was bought by the Ethiopian, was it government? Was it ministry?
By the Ethiopian government, in fact.
Okay. Um, So I guess to follow up on that, how did the relationship between the mother church in Ethiopia and the early churches in the U.S. work at the beginning? Like, what sort of communication were they having to have? Like, was it a lot of like complaints from the American churches saying that, oh, there's maybe not enough congregation, or it's hard like renting a space? Because I mean, to think of it now, like getting out of church at 9:30 seems insane. But to think that was something that they needed to do in order to keep the place that they wanted to worship in. So I guess how did that conversation work between the mother churches in Ethiopia and in America?
This is a difficult question to answer. I don't think the church administration in Ethiopia was much proactive in
Mm,
supporting the mission here in the United States.
I
And,
see.
and I can, mention a couple of examples for this. I have had the privilege of meeting Abuna Isaac several times, and he used to tell us, uh, a great deal of what he had to go through. He
Mm,
basically was given the mission, but he was not supported.
mm,
I mentioned earlier, the church in South Africa.
mm-hmm,
The church in South Africa was established not because the church reached out, it is because the South Africans themselves reached out, sought out uh, the church. And so
interesting.
their background, for the most part, was, I believe, Anglican and Presbyterian. But even 100 years before the establishment of the church, they started calling themselves Ethiopians. And I asked why they started calling themselves the Ethiopian Church. And they said because it's mentioned in the Bible so many times, so this must be the right church.
Mm,
And, during the Derg regime, that is the communist regime, they tried to make contact uh, with the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And during that time, they were still under apartheid.
mm,
And they were not able to make that contact because of the politics. But they happened to see uh, a, um, a funeral service for Bob Marley, which was conducted by His Grace Abuna Isaac. And so this was a big opportunity for them. So they made contact with him. And he is the one who went and established the church in South Africa. So this was in the 1990s, I believe. And when we look at, I have had an opportunity to go there, I think about a year and a half ago. And the church really, for the most part, I can say, for the most part, yeah, ignored uh,
mm,
the mission. I'm not saying that the South Africans were completely ignored, but
right.
for the most part, it's not supported. There are some things that are done. For example, the divine liturgy partially was translated into their native language. I think it was called Xhosa, and so they do conduct the divine liturgy in that language. There are a few notable things that are done, but not nearly enough as to how much should be done. And when it comes to the US, it is the same. And as far as the problem of the growth of the church and the problem having a shortage of space and so forth,
Mm,
because of uh, the dysfunction. That can probably explain what the dysfunction was later, but because of the dysfunction of the hierarchical relationship between the church that were established in Ethiopia and the diocese itself here in the US, and also the mother church, there was not much of a relationship. And there was a lot of politics that was at play that affected it very much also. Having to go into much into that.
I see. So I can't even imagine going from across waters um, to create a church that is trying to at least resemble the mother church so much. So I have to say, how did the church within America, I mean, of course, it started in Harlem in New York. How did that spread like almost like wildfire across all these different states to where you said almost over 250 churches now in America? That
I
is
think that's a very
insane.
low estimate.
Wow. That is insane to think. How did that spread?
Mm. So while the spread, the growth of the church is very good, for the most part, from what I have seen, the manner in which it was spread was actually not pleasant. And that's
Mm,
why I revealed that, the expansion has not always been smooth. And that is
mhm.
because of, I mentioned the hierarchical dysfunction. Uh,
Yes.
uh, in the relationship of the local parishes with the bishop and or with the archdiocese and the archdiocese with the mother church. Because of that dysfunction, there was not uh, any real way of resolving a conflict within a
Mm,
parish.
I
And
see.
in many ways, actually, the conflict, especially in the 1990s, the conflict that we see in several parishes occurred because of uh, the dysfunction of the hierarchy of the church itself. And
Mm,
specifically, what I mean is that uh, when the churches were established, for the most part, the Ethiopian churches within the Ethiopian community, they were not established with uh, the ordinances or within according to the canon of the church having the appropriate constitution for a sound relationship. Second, when there was a change of regime in Ethiopia uh, from monarchy into the communist regime,
mm,
Berg was deposed and he would sadly be martyred by the government later.
I
And
see.
another patriarch would be uh, consecrated. His Grace Abuna Teklahamanut, who had done a great deal for the church. And so here in the West, there was a political dynamic about, should we accept a bishop who was considered now by some a bishop of the communist regime instead of a bishop of the
Mm,
church. And this toxic feeling basically grew again because there were with a change of government again from the communist regime from Derek
mm,
to TPLF. His Holiness Abuna Magorios, he was forced out from his position,
mm.
and His Holiness Abuna Paulus became patriarch, the patriarch of Ethiopia.
So
And
there was a lot of political turmoil.
there was a lot of political turmoil in the country, and
Mm,
this affected basically the church here in the States. And so because of that, uh, many churches that were established here in the US, they would not accept His Holiness Abuna Paulus
mm,
because of and I'm not going to get into whether one party is right or wrong.
right.
All I would say is that the circumstances were unfortunate, and so there was a split in the church immediately.
I
Those who
see.
accepted uh, the, the patriarchship of Abuna Paulus and those who did not accept that. And there were many bishops also that came to the United States. His Holiness Abuna Magorios also ended up coming into the United States. And so they became exiled here. and they established basically a synod in exile. Established may not be a word that many want to use because they simply consider themselves the synod, the authentic synod in exile. And so again, I'm just using words without any favor in any
Right.
place.
Absolutely.
So because of that, there was a great deal of turmoil. Many different parishes, whether to accept the synod in exile or the synod in Ethiopia. And there were many other dynamics also. And there were many who did not really have the interest of the church at heart, but who wanted to make the church their political battlefield. And so this played a great deal. And so because of this, there was a division in many parishes. And so the church basically started splitting. Parishes started splitting, into two, into three, into four. And that's how most of the church really expanded or grew up. And so after one church, basically, that's how most of the church. It's not all of the churches. There are different exemplary situations in which one church would support the establishment of another parish, even though there may be some bumps, but in general, there are some examples of this. And so this happened. Now, I want to mention that, this conflict within a parish did not start with the appointment of His Holiness Abuna Isaac as a patriarch. It started before that. And so I mentioned earlier, that there was a church established in 1973, Angeles. And that there was a conflict in that church, and it was split into two. And so there is this church still exists, and there is also another church under Saint Mary with a different, I guess, qualifier for the name. So these were not just splits, but at times they were costly because the parties that were at conflict would go to court and spend a whole lot of money, a whole lot of resources, and the emotional toll that this has taken on the believers was really too great to talk about. And we can still see the effects of this because there are many wounds that have not healed from what I know. But it is in this manner, really, the church just proliferated and grew. But, say that God works in mysterious ways. And so, for the most part, now there is a great deal of unity actually among these churches that were established in this manner.
No,
It's history of the ex-woman.
To drag the conversation even more down about talking about some challenges, but I'm actually really glad we're having this conversation because I feel like the history of the EOTC churches within America, while maybe some people might know it, it's not something that's widely known across generations. So I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. But of course, like you said, having all of these churches within America as it is a blessing, and now we can celebrate feasts with one another at different churches and coming together for things like Tumkat. I want to talk about some challenges and maybe some conflicts that the EOTC churches in America have faced. I know we talked about a good amount of them, about there being some splits, the reason that there are so many different churches because of, I guess, the tug of war effect that the Ethiopian politics had on our churches. But aside from those, what do you think have been some of the other big challenges that churches in America have faced over these past couple of decades?
So what I mentioned for the most part is really the problem with the split among the church fathers. But what I probably would say the biggest problem is that there was not, and I mentioned this already, there was not a proactive approach from the Magic Church to create some sort of harmony in the church in the diaspora. And one of the ways, from the get-go, from the first establishment to make sure that there is harmony among the churches and a solid communication and hierarchical order within the church was to have a sound constitution, sound bylaws, and a uniform bylaws. And this is something that the other sister churches have. We look at the Coptic Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, several of the other apostolic churches. They do have a uniform guiding ordinance and constitution. At times, among some of these churches, there would be a general uniform constitution for all, and some of the churches would have their own local ordinances. This could be for the purpose of dealing with local and state laws. But nevertheless, the general constitution would have priority, would have prominence over the local ones. And these, I think, were very important, and it would have served the church very well. And now, unfortunately, this is still the case today. And despite the fact that there is a much greater harmony among the churches today than how it was a decade ago, the fact that we still don't have a uniform constitution is a problem. We have about 10 dioceses here in the US and 11 in Canada. Because there is no uniform constitution for all the different dioceses and for all the different parish, the hierarchical communication is really very weak. And I dare say that it could be considered to be non-existent. Apart from getting together and celebrating some holidays that the church, generally celebrates, the parishes generally celebrate together, like the Feast of the Holy Cross or Epiphany. Apart from that, there is really no meaningful working relationship. And so this has been a problem, a major problem in the last 2 decades, and it is still a problem. Here, I would also like to mention that there was, in fact, a resistance to now, the church itself did not try to, was not proactive, as I mentioned, but if there were, there would also be a resistance. There was this notion that the Ethiopian constitution, which is called Qala Awadi, that it would not be used here in the United States because of local laws, and that is generally more of a myth, a reality. And if there needed to be a few things that had to be changed, it could be done without changing the general structure of the constitution. And this was not something that would be pushed back against just by the faithful, just by the laity, but there were some clergy also who would push back against this. And the reasons are different. I'm not going to go into that right now, but it would have been a challenge back then. It would be less challenging if the church would be more proactive, but also, instead of just trying to amend and institute a constitution for the church here in the US, it is important to make it more participatory because of a misunderstanding of what the Kala Awadi is, the constitution for basically for the administration of the church from parish level to the patriarchate level. Generally, there is an opposition for it, and so it requires diligence going around and teaching the faithful in different parishes about what this constitution is, about the benefits of it, about the importance of it, about how it is derived and established in the first place for the benefit of the church. And so there is a great misunderstanding of that still today, which is still not being done.
I see. It definitely, I mean, of course, as this video did start about the whole migration from the EOTC church from Ethiopia to here, as we've gotten to discuss, it truly has been an enlightening conversation. I hope that everybody that's watching has been able to learn a lot, as have I. And I guess before we end, to kind of make a full circle of this video, in the beginning, you mentioned that when the EOTC church actually just opened in Harlem, I believe it was October 25th.
So yes.
October 25th, 1959.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was before, 10 years before, autocephaly of the church.
Wow. Wow. That seems like forever ago, but it also was just yesterday. So to think that the hundreds of people that were baptized, and so many people that were baptized at such a young age of the church, dare I say, day one of the church here in the US. I guess, what does that have to say about the churches that we have now in the United States? I mean, like you said, we've have over hundreds of EOTC churches across the nation, including Canada. And to think that on day one, we were able to baptize hundreds of people to now where we can honestly baptize a fourth of what were originally baptized in 1 year. What are some things that you think the EOTC faith maybe or not the EOTC faith, but the EOTC church maybe has, I guess, lost its eyes upon as the time goes on?
So let me go back and make a quick correction. I said the church in New York was established 10 years before autocephaly, but it's actually in the same year as
okay.
Yeah. And so, as I mentioned, we see the missionary nature of the church early. The unfortunate circumstance that I had described in the destruction of the hierarchy and in the conflicts in many different parishes is that there has been no focus, no concerted focus early enough on the children that were born here, and also on reaching out non-Ethiopians. And this has gone on for a very long time. Thank goodness that has changed, but not nearly enough. As I mentioned, a fourth of what were baptized in 1959. That is, it's just a number that I throw. If we baptize about 50 all over the US a year, I think that is a great number now. I don't think we are doing that. But for the most part, the missionary attribute of the church is manifesting now, thanks to the youth movement, really. One thing that I want to mention here is that many people think that divine liturgy in English started recently with the youth movement, but it actually started long ago. Abu Ishaq had a booklet printed that has to follow the divine liturgy, that has the Ge'ez hymnals in English alphabets. And then the translation in English. I have a copy of it. I wish I had it to show here. And he was conducting divine liturgy in English in Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, and in most of these places, and in New York. And so this was something that was already established. That was done a long time ago. So it's not new. But now it is expanding. It's not limited to New York or to Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago or South Africa and stuff. It is happening here, and it is growing. The youth movement for growing, basically for expanding the church, is becoming something that is really commendable. Again, this effort is coming from the youth. It's coming from below, from the lowest level of the hierarchy, not from the highest level of the hierarchy. And there needs to be a concerted effort at the highest level of the hierarchy, so that this expansion, this work, would not, die out. Because for the most part, the youth today that are driving this are professionals. But thank goodness we have several deacons and priests now these days who are conducting the divine liturgy in English, many vibrant young minds, young deacons, some of whom have been guests on this show, who are very well read on the faith, and who could teach. It is a blessing to see that. It's wonderful, but we need a concerted effort from the hierarchy at the highest level, and from each diocese. We should not be serving just Ethiopians, because the church is not just for Ethiopians. The church is for the whole human race. And it is our duty and our responsibility to share this. It's not just ours. It's not given to us to keep. It's given to us to spread. This is the most important mission the Lord Jesus Christ gave the disciples. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Church. And the church needs to be proactive in this missionary endeavor. That's what I would say in conclusion.
Absolutely. So well said. And I feel like it's honestly a perfect way to end this conversation. Thank you, Kesis, for joining me. I'm so glad we talked about the missionary aspect and the evangelism that we as EOTC Christians have a responsibility to do, to share the faith. Because, like you said, it is not just for the Ethiopian diaspora in America. It is for all who are willing to accept God's words into his heart. If you'd like to actually hear more about maybe some evangelism that's been going on within the U.S., Kesis actually himself had a hand in doing this when it was hosted a couple months ago, actually, at the very first conference, actually in Dallas, hosted at Debre Berhan Qadis Selassie. It was the very first Fruits of Evangelism conference. If you want to hear more about that, there's videos posted on Mawara Qadusan that you guys can go ahead and watch. But of course, again, thank you, Kesis, for joining me. I hope that to whoever is watching this, wherever, whenever you are, that you enjoyed and that you learned a lot more. And again, Kesis, thank you so much. If you have any last words.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here. That's all I have.
All right. It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys at next week's episode. Have a good Sunday.